will speak more technical today, because all these difficulties users are meeting. However, we are so proud of this change of this new engine and the quality this engine can produce that we would like to clarify some issues around this. And my presentation will be divided in 3 main chapters. The first one will treat the engine itself and the different settings along the engine. Then materials, how materials behave and how the engine conceives the interaction of materials with the light. And at the end, we will speak about the setting of the lights, of course. So let's start with the engine. So far, whenever we have presented Artlantis, we said always that it's an easy to use and fast rendering application able to do high quality images without being physically correct. With the new engine, Artlantis enters a club of elite rendering application by making a big step forward. And in this club, the keyword is the physically correct calculation of light. What does it mean? It means that the engine won't presume the light anymore. It won't suppose it, it won't fake it. It will accurately measure the light. And the same engine will be able to balance the different behaviors of materials like shininess, reflection, and other attributes in the frame of the energy conservation. And this elite club of rendering applications such as Cinema 4D or V-Ray are all the most known to be quoted today on the market, are dealing exactly with the physically correct calculation of the light and energy conservation as well. The results are really astonishing. These are the best renderings ever during the whole lifetime of Artlantis 6 and Artlantis in general. So these images done in Artlantis 6 can be compared easily with the quality of renderings done in 4D or V-Ray, of course. And quality became a keyword for Artlantis from now on. And in fact, quality is the real admission pass in this elite club of rendering applications. However, it's important to be aware of the complexity of this calculation which is needed to compute such a rendering. So to do this increased amount of job, the system requirements increased. So we need now for Artlantis 6 a more powerful computer, not only in terms of the processors, but also graphic card. Is done by the processors. The graphic card will play a very important role whenever we open a geometry, either because we open a new Artlantis file, either because we drag and drop a new object into the preview window, so we add a new geometry to our scene. If you know that little delay that may occur in a moment the new object is dropped into the scene, and the time difference of displaying this object in the preview, that may depend on the graphic card, for example. And of course, it's also the graphic card's duty to display the OpenGL mode in the preview window. So let's take a rendering, actually, and based on this rendering, let's follow up how Artlantis measures the light and how it senses, in fact. This is an interior scene, and while I was calculating this rendering, I did a capture of screen capture, a video about the way Artlantis deals with this calculation. At the same time, I'm highlighting the rendering parameters for this image. Before launching this video, let me highlight those two main techniques to measure the light. The first one starts to measure the light directly from the emission source until its complete absorption. The other technique will measure the light bouncing into surfaces. And this is what Artlantis is using. This is called irradiance. Irradiance caching, and now I'm starting the video. So the irradiance caching is an acceleration technique for computing the global illumination for a scene by sampling the bouncing energy in some test points and interpolating the values. And as you can see, there are a lot of test points, sampling points on the surface of this image already appearing. If a surface is flat, set with the same material, and remains evenly lit, these test points will be distributed evenly the same and won't be oversampled. In those areas, now I'm stop a little bit this video to finish my explanation here. So in those areas where the geometry changes because two surfaces meet, for example, along edges, or if there is a hole in the geometry, or in and out, and you can note around the picture frame right in front in the middle of the image, that is a 3D, so there is a change in the geometry, or a material change, or light condition change, then there will be an oversampling in order to calculate accurately the differences. And let me continue this video now. And after this sampling is done, Artlantis will proceed the final calculation of the image. This irradiance technique is used by Cinema 4D and V-Ray as well, so we are really calculating in the same way the light unlike these rendering applications. Accuracy, hemisphere, interpolation, materials, and lights. And we are in a lucky situation because the values for each goes from 1 to 5. So let's start with accuracy. And for this, I've prepared an interior. The most important is that is a white model, because now we can really sense the differences when we change the values for accuracy, because accuracy will oversample those regions which are affected by the indirect light. So this indirect shadow should be computed more precisely on the overall surface of the rendering. And let me highlight some territories and ask you to pay more attention to these parts of the rendering while I'm changing the values for accuracy. So I go for 2, and I'm go for increase it to 3, and you already may note that the radiosity shadow right below the couch, for example, or the wrinkles of the fabric, or the textile, this scarf, or just dropped on the couch, become more alive. Value set to 4, and this is the maximum. The 3D feeling is very much improved for this image. In fact, accuracy plays an enormous role to enhance this 3D feeling whenever we have a lot of objects, a lot of indirect lights, indirectly lit objects with a lot of radiosity shadows, small things here and there, then it will be very spectacular and will add very much value to our scene. If we go outside, and I'm speaking outside, but in fact I'm speaking about a scene where there are big objects with huge flat plans in front of the camera, no many details in and out of the geometry, so there are very few parts on my image which would request oversampling for accuracy. So let's see what can achieve in such a case. Accuracy value set to 1, to 2, 3, 4, and 5. The oversampling certainly was done in very small areas, some details which appear a bit hidden compared to what is in the main focus of the camera in this image. So because accuracy is a quite time-consuming slider, we should pay attention at the character of our scene. So whenever we have a lot of small object, a lot of indirect light, a lot of in and outs of a geometry, then we should increase the accuracy. However, for an outside scene with big flat facades, accuracy won't make big difference, only it will increase the rendering time. So this is the first slider. The second slider will mostly the indirect lighting of a scene. And now I will jump right to number 5, a value 5 for hemisphere. So as I told you, it's about the preciseness of the sampling and the quality of the sampling for accuracy. The next slider is about interpolation. What should be interpolated? First of all, and let me highlight those parts of on the walls especially where appear these radiosity splashes that may occur in a low light condition. This scene has some lamps, and the scene itself is not very much lit, so it's a kind of low light scene, let's say. And because the sampling are not interpolated correctly, may appear on some parts these patches. So the interpolation set to 2 will already make a difference. Set to 3, to 4, and 5, this is the maximum value for interpolation, and that will make these patches disappear. And it's very evident now because we are working on a white model, of course in a colored shader mode. Won't be so evident, therefore I'm showing you on this white model. That also takes time. Less important, time increase is less important like accuracy. Let's go for sampling materials. So where should we sample materials? What does it mean that the sampling materials is needed? And I will highlight now some regions in this rendering which concern the need of more samples for material. On the bookshelves, you see a lot of noise on the back part of the bookshelf, and even on a front of the bookshelf, wherever the material turns more reflective, more shiny. The same is the lower part of the scale that gets more direct light, you see, and it starts to shine. the reflection that appears in the parquet is very much dotted, is very noisy. This is a part, and there is another one, this spider leg table with the legs appearing, reflective legs, reflective material, which should be sampled more to have an accurate calculation of it. So this is the sampling for material that takes longer time whenever we increase it. And very time consuming is the sampling for lights that may occur. We see that mostly the overall surface of the rendering remains very noisy. That's the time when we should increase the sampling for lights. Now, let's turn back to our example, which was about this interior scene. And we always have to pay attention, what is the rendering about? It's a kitchen interior. We have a lot of rebounces. That's important. Then we have big flat surfaces for the cupboard, for the floor, for the wall. So there are not too many in and outs. The light enters through the window. There is a lot of direct light entering into the room. The rendering settings used to calculate this rendering were those belonging to the file originally, and everything was pushed to the maximum. Only the interpolation was left to value number 2. So let me switch. First, it's important to say that every rendering you will see from now on were calculated in a full HD size. It means 1920 pixels per 1080 pixels. Because the size also matters, it's important to highlight this. So now let's see what was the time Artlantis needed to calculate this rendering, so 48 minutes and 2 seconds. And then I changed the rendering settings and turn it to the presets in Artlantis. So I switched to interior and medium settings. So everything was cut back, the accuracy, the hemisphere, the materials were sampled less. And the rendering is the result of these settings. Let's check out the time. It's 22 minutes and 21 seconds. Dropped for less than a half. It's an important decrease in time, and the difference, it's ignorable, frankly to say. So if I go back to the previous longer maximum settings, then I cannot notice such a big difference at all. So I have to pay very much attention, and some details around the plan, or maybe the borders, the edges of the shadows are sharper, but it's so few differences are compared between the two that I would prefer the medium settings and make the rendering faster. The next example is an outside scene. An outside scene, and once again, if we take a look at the scene itself, we have big plans, facades that are not very agitated, not too many reliefs, and the light is abundantly shining into the scene. It's a daytime, full daytime lighting, very much the facade, so everything gets a lot of light. Rendering parameters are, I'm using the presets again, so I chose the exterior and the speed option. It was 1 minute 29 seconds. Then I increased. Let's see, what's the time difference? Of course, the time difference will increase. and it will take even more time if I go for the quality settings. Does it worth to go for the quality settings? Or I could be satisfied with a medium, but I also could be satisfied with the speed. What's the difference? Of course, this difference exists. If I take a look at these holes here at the right side of the building, there's so small differences that I can even ignore them and go for a faster calculation. A third example concerns an interior night time, let's say, and I considered it a low light condition. So also with the presets, I'm now going the other way around. I will start with the quality and then go backward. But before showing you the rendering times and the different results, once again, let's take a look at the rendering. So it's about an interior, and we have a quite abundant direct light in this scene that comes from the spots. There are 6 spots right in front of the bookshelf on the ceiling, and this lamp also that got the neon light for the bulb. So this scene with the quality, so maximum settings, was computed in almost an hour. If I switch to the medium settings, it was dropped down to the half, so 31 minutes and 28 seconds. And then I chose the minimum settings, and that was the result, 14 minutes and 35 seconds. So for this scene, I would choose for the medium. I would go for the medium, because in the speed, I'm losing some details, some reflection on a parquet maybe. And if I want to improve maybe even more, I would increase with only one single value the material sampling to have accurately calculated the lower part of the scale. I won't use the quality, the maximum settings. So it's always the situation will decide which would be the best rendering option possible. I was measuring the size, and just to show you that the size matters, the most of the renderings are done in full HD. And what happens, and because my option was the medium and interior low light conditions, I did the same rendering, and there is a single thing that changed, and that was the size. So I dropped the size to 1280 pixels per 720 pixels. And you see, even the time decreased very much. So I noticed, however, that beta testers in the files of beta testers, they prefer to render a very large renderings, 3000 pixels, 4000 pixels. Of course, it's possible, so there is no limitation at all. We should be aware that that will take a longer time. And let's continue with anti-aliasing, because this is also a time factor. But first of all, what is anti-aliasing? So let me draw a letter A and take a part of this letter A and scale it, zoom in. There is no anti-aliasing for the moment, but I enlarge it as much to have 1 pixel large like a square like this. So what happens if I choose anti-aliasing 3 × 3? It means that I ask Artlantis to analyze the whole surface of the rendering territories of 9 pixels, so 3 × 3 pixels, and look for some scaling effects like here to smooth them afterwards. If I choose the second option, which is 4 × 4, It means that I force Artlantis to take even a larger territory of 16 pixels to check the scaling effects everywhere, and then to smooth it. So that requests more job from Artlantis size if I increase it to 4x4. So let's go back. No anti-aliasing at all with anti-aliasing. So this is the way Artlantis proceeds. And now let's check out what happens on the renderings. So let's see how it happens on an example. And I did an example of the spider leg table with no anti-aliasing for the moment. So if I take a closer look to this, enlarge a little bit the legs of the table, I notice the scaling, which is not nice at all. So definitely I need to set the anti-aliasing at least to 3x3. So what I get, anti-aliased already the spider legs, they appear much better. And I did a rendering with the 4x4 option as well. So I'm still in 3x3 actually, and now I switch to 4x4. Here is. I can note a little bit improvement, but in this case, once again, I would accept. You see, if I enlarge it, the differences are not so important compared to what we had previously. So this is 4x4. I step back to 3x3, and it's already a very nice result. The anti-aliasing was completely reworked in Artlantis 6, and now this option 3x3 is already much better compared to what we had in Artlantis 5. I did a second rendering without the enhanced background checked, and I was very surprised to see how much the rendering time decreased. This is not an average time decrease, let's say, because it's an exceptional situation. Because generally, we might say that the enhanced background will affect the rendering time, increase the rendering time with 20–30%. This is quite exceptional, however. But in this case, I would prefer the enhanced background checked, because without the rebounces, without the coloring coming from the HDRI and the brightness coming from the HDRI, I'm missing some richness of my rendering of my scene. So let's go back and take a look at the quality of this image. How beautiful is this gradient, this radiosity, let's say, shadow that may appear on the wall, on this coating wall, and as the wall is oriented toward the sun or more shaded, is differentiated much more, so the image becomes alive. It's not so flat as it was before. So this is the enhanced background that also affects the rendering time. Summing up the engine, I would suggest to use the rendering parameter presets. They are very well set, they were reworked, reconsidered, and they work very well. And trust the setting, the lower settings for these presets. As you could see, regardless whether we are in an exterior or interior or daytime, nighttime, in fact, the way the light is casted into the scene matters. We have a lot of direct light, lower settings will give a very good result already. So the amount of direct light in a scene, this is what matters first of all. The rendering size also matters. The same will affect the rendering time, the anti-aliasing and the enhanced background for exteriors when we have HDRI images checked. The enhanced background shouldn't be checked whenever we render interiors, because there the sky dome rebounces won't play such a big role. We should concentrate on what the lighting we have in interior. Therefore, I suggest not to check it whenever we are rendering interior scenes. So let me continue with the next chapter about the material. And take back that scene I showed you already for the enhanced sky, this beautiful building. It's a nice family house. And I took the same house from another point of view, from the entrance, with exactly the same rendering parameters. And because the HDRI image emits the light from the sky dome, of course, I kept it checked. So this is the scene about. The rendering time increased very much. Why? It's curious because the light is the same, the rendering parameters are the same. However, it changed because these huge glass surfaces. Why? Here, Artlantis makes a double job. In fact, he needs to calculate, because it's a very reflective and transparent material. He has to calculate the image that appears from the environment, so which is reflected in this glass. So first of all, he needs to calculate the reflections, and the second time, he needs to calculate the lighting in the interior. Otherwise, we couldn't have information about this dining table or what happens inside behind the glass. So this job will request him much more time compared to the previous scene where we had big coated surfaces, not reflective at all, and most of the rendering was composed of it. As you see, material quality matters also very much whenever it's about the rendering time. At every step we have a different outlook of the material. That will affect the material definitely. So it's now a real slider, not like in version 5, where we had big jumps of the slider and it started to act only at one of the ends. Reflections are now calculated like real 3D reflections. Previously, in version 5, the reflection was a 2D map that was added to the scene on the last part of the computing, and it was a kind of estimation, a supposition of the reflected image. It was kind of Photoshop map over materials that should reflect anything, and with this estimation it was quite fast to compute. Now these reflections are very realistic and they are precisely calculated. We call them 3D reflections. So just to inform you more details, to tell you more details about the way this engine works and why this engine computes in a very realistic manner materials. Let me go further and take an example. A car, and here is this beautiful car paint, and I would like to concentrate on this red part of the car where I have reflections. I have a very nice diffuse color. I like very much this red, and the reflections are nicely attenuated here and there, so it's a good example. So I take the basic shader, the well-known basic shader of Artlantis, drag and drop it on a car, set it very shiny, and I don't like it very much. I'm losing the diffuse color here, so the red, it's not the same anymore. And it's so reflective that in some parts I'm completely losing the diffuse color, so it turns more blue, reflecting the sky. So this is not my purpose. Then I change the settings for the diffuse, the basic shader. I cut back the shininess, and I will get something glossy, more plastic. It's not the result I was looking for. So let's go back to my result and let's see which shader can do this. I can do that only with a diffuse Fresnel shader, and this was the shader applied on a car when this rendering was done. So this shader is able to vary the reflection shininess of the material according to the viewing angle, and also handles the attenuation of the reflected image. Why can do this Fresnel like this? So what's Fresnel, in fact? And I took an example. This the other way around, because the angle is measured compared to the vertical to the surface, so the normal of the surface. And depending on this angle, every material in nature may produce this Fresnel effect, may become shiny, may become reflective. And of course, the asphalt is one example. Then this angle should be very large. However, we know that taking in a hand a metallic material, metallic object, we shouldn't shouldn't have this angle so big. At a very small angle, while we are looking almost perpendicular on this material, on this object, reflections occur. So here is another factor, the refraction, that will manage the variation of this angle. Refraction is also a natural phenomenon that is about bending the light. In a moment, it enters another media. So just imagine that the light crosses the air and arrives on a surface of a water, on a lake, enters the water, and it changes direction without changing its frequency. Each material has a different refraction index, as we call. The air has 1 as a value. It doesn't bend the light direction at all. The water already bends it. It gets 1.3, and so far. So let's see in our example here. I have a material on this sphere, Fresnel diffuse shader, of course, with shininess set to maximum, a little bit of reflectiveness, and the refraction index is 1. So there is no bending of the light. I have a clear visibility of the diffuse color of the material. And I'm changing only the refraction index for this material. And as I change it, in fact, the material turns more and more reflective. I'm already at 3. That's much more close to diamond. I'm increasing even more, and it turns even more shiny, even more reflective. I start to see even the surroundings. I can clearly read the numbers in the reflection. I'm 7.5 now, and this is the maximum value, 10. So now the material turns very reflective. It's more characterized through this reflectiveness. This is the Fresnel curve for the water. For a metallic surface, we get reflections right at the beginning because it has a different index of refraction, and the curve is less important. At a very low value at this angle, we have these reflections. The most extreme example is the mirror that is reflective right away. How appears this refraction in the inspector of shaders? So this is the diffuse Fresnel shader parameter. It's a screenshot about those settings we should set whenever we use the diffuse Fresnel. So we should set the diffuse color, which was set to orange this time. The shininess was set to maximum. A little bit of reflection was added to the material, and the fourth slider was the refraction, what I changed. There is only 4 sliders to set the diffuse Fresnel shader, and for refraction there are quite many presets, so the list is quite long. To help you out, to find the right value for your situation, for your case. Are you setting a parquet? Are you setting a car paint, a plexiglass, an ice, metallic surface, and so forth? I would like to highlight the simplicity of these settings, and the same goes for the basic shader, only for sliders. However, in the case of the basic, I should say that the refraction works only if the basic shader get a bit transparency. And the same refraction index can be added to image shaders as well if in the shader editor we check the Fresnel checkbox. These are in fact the main shader families in the catalog of Artlantis. We shouldn't forget about the neon light shader. And I would like to highlight again the simplicity of the settings here. We are speaking about natural phenomena like Fresnel and refraction because now these sliders are working in a very accurate manner. They are reproducing correctly phenomena known from nature. So being aware of them will help us out to set faster our materials. However, there aren't an abundance of settings, as you see, and this is in the policy of PubMed to keep these settings accessible, easy to use, so to continue to provide users an Artlantis which is easy to use and produces the best quality possible. Because the surface turns very reflective, and in some parts we are even losing the diffuse color. It appears gray because it reflects the surroundings. So this is the energy conservation about. The engine will cut off, first of all, it will display the reflection, and if it doesn't have enough energy, remaining enough energy to display the diffuse, the transparency will be cut off and then the diffuse. The most extreme example is the mirror. Like in real life, you take a look at the mirror and what do you see? Yourself. Question: which is the diffuse color of the mirror? Who can tell? When everything is a big reflection, so the all bouncing light is rebounced in form of reflection, and we cannot sense anymore the real diffuse of a mirror. about materials, we should be aware that the different material settings will affect very much the rendering time. So the characteristics, the behavior of the material, if it's shiny, if it's reflective, transparent, or contrary, doesn't have reflection at all, will affect the rendering time. Materials react to light in a very realistic manner. Whenever we tell it into a demonstration, you can trust the Artlantis engine because the materials will become very realistic. This is what we are speaking about. So these are the most important conclusions about materials, and I'm continuing now with the last chapter about the lights. And I take back our scene exterior. So it was fast to render. Just to remember the setting time, I will keep it all the time on my screen here, which was calculated for this scene with the sun lighting directly the facade, because I changed the position of the sun and now the light comes from the backward. So most of the facade, most of the part of the facades are not lit directly, they get an indirect lighting. And I redone the renderings with the same presets for exterior, speed, and so forth. And now we can compare the time. So for exterior speed, we already sense an increase in time. Exterior medium, it's increased almost the double we had for the medium. And of course, it will be increased even more for the quality. So the quality of lighting of a scene will affect very much the rendering time. More direct light we have, the easier it is to compute for the engine. More indirect light we have, that will take longer, definitely. So these are statements we cannot change or optimize. This is this way. Another very good news, because this engine is the easiness to calculate neon lights. And just to make sure that is so, let's take the rendering, the interior in low light condition, with the medium settings, where there are a lot of direct lights, as I told you, and spots artificial lights, Artlantis lights. So we are now taking a look. We will change the lighting for the scene for the same camera view. I am deactivating the artificial lights. Even the little lamp was turned off, and a plan is set at the right side of this interior, and the neon light was applied on it. As you see, the calculation time is very close to what we had, even a bit faster compared to the previous scene. So now the neon shader can be used with the same ease. There is no time increase. The light power for the neon light will depend on the, let's say, units, surface units. So if we apply it on a larger surface, we should increase the light power assigned to the neon light shader, just because this is how it works. light powers, and all the rest was similar. The big difference of time, because I computed it in 17 minutes, may occur because the computer power as well. However, let's start from this example and see what we can optimize in this case. So first of all, the sun shines directly into these lamps, and I know value set to these lights, 14,643 lumens, enormous. But even with this, there isn't any artificial light on in the world that will overcome the sun. So their effect is almost disappears. Only the light cone makes a difference. Unfortunately, the light cone makes a big difference in the rendering time as well. So the first thing I did, I deactivated the light cones, and already the rendering time dropped down to 2 minutes 27 seconds. It's huge. It's a very big difference. And then I did some other optimizations, let's say. I decreased the light powers to something realistic, but I even deactivated them because they are useless, and unchecked the enhanced background, and set the settings to exterior and speed, because the scene is very light and we have a lot of light in the scene. So I did it less than a minute. It's a very big difference compared to 17 minutes. Summing up lights, we should take care. We should be aware, better say, not take care. It's always the camera view and our intention to represent something will decide the scene. But if a scene is abundant in direct light, the rendering will be performed easier by the engine, so we can trust the lower settings, and this is regardless whether they are exterior, interior scenes, or daytime or nighttime scenes. I hope I could convince you. Set realistic values for the artificial lights. Now, because they are in lumens, here is another important parameter that acts in the realism of our scenes. If we think of the size of the computing time, then the light cone affects very much the rendering time, and the neon light at the other side can be calculated very rapidly at the same speed with any artificial light. So here is the end of my presentation.